And it goes a little something like.
Good day everyone. For today's topic, we will discuss the President of the Philippines highlight of their administration. These are the President who administered the Philippine Republic. Now let's proceed to their administration. President Manuel Rojas. Rojas campaign against Sukbalak movement. Democratic Alliance, a coalition of organization, guerrilla groups or hooks, pambansang kaisahan ng mga mangbubukid or PKM, and 4 progressive groups. It won 6 congressional seats during the 1946 election, but because of its anti-collaborationist and anti-parity stand, Rojas finds a way to eradicate them from their position on the ground that they are cheating during the election and terrorism. Rojas outlawed hooks and PKM in 1948. Manuel Rojas' priorities were industrialization of the Philippines, preservation of close cooperation and special relation with the U.S., maintenance of the rule of law and order. Programs and policies under Rojas' administration: Tidings Rehabilitation Act, Belt Trade Act, Parity Rights, Military Bases Agreement, and adopted pro-American policy. Tidings Rehabilitation Act, the security unit of the U.S.-Philippine War Damage Commission. On April 13, 1946, the Philippine Rehabilitation or the Tidings Act of 1946 passed by the U.S. Congress was approved by the U.S. President. This act created U.S.-Philippine War Damage Commission, authorized it to spend a total of $400 million in payment of private war damage claims and another $120 million for the restoration of this latter amount of $57 million was allotted to the commission itself. The commission opened its offices in Manila towards the end of 1946, but the public property claim payments did not begin until the latter half of 1947. Private property claims started April 1948. Next is Bell Trade Act. Bell Trade Act 1946. This gave the American businessman the right to exploit natural resources, to operate public utilities and other business, and enjoy the pre-war free trade agreement. The Philippines government accepted the Bell Trade Act in exchange for war damage payment. Parity rights. On October 1945, the American Congress passed a bill into law known as the Bell Trade Relation Act, which provided the free trade relation between the Philippines and U.S. should continue beyond the Commonwealth period or up to 1954. This meant that the Americans, like the Filipinos, would be given the right to dispose, exploit, develop, and utilize all agricultural, timber, and minerals lands in the Philippines. It was a great advantage for the American investors, the inclusion of the parity amendment in the Constitution. This was during the term of former President Manuel Rojas. This was the debt required by the U.S. in exchange for the funds poured into the Philippines for its rehabilitation after the war. Military Bases Agreement. On March 14, 1947, the Military Bases Agreement was signed by the President Manuel Rojas and Paul V. McNutt, the United States High Commissioner in the Philippines, and concurred in by the Philippine Senate on March 26, 1947 and accepted and ratified by the U.S. on January 21, 1948. President Manuel Rojas and U.S. Ambassador Paul V. McNutt Wright signs the Military Bases Agreement in Malacañang Palace, surrounded by onlookers including Vice President Elpidio Quirino, far left. The agreement provides principally for the granting by the Philippines to the United States to the right to retain the use of the bases in the Philippines. The Philippines further agreed to enter into negotiations with the United States at the latter's request to permit the United States to expand such bases, to exchange such bases for other bases, to acquire additional bases, or relinquish rights to bases, as any of such exigencies may be required by military necessities. Next is President Elpidio Quirino. Two main objectives of Quirino's administration are economic reconstruction of nation through industrialization and restoration of the faith and confidence of the people in the government. Programs and policies under Quirino's administration. The creation of PACSA, President Action Committee on Social Amelioration to alleviate the economic plight of the masses. On 1948, President Elpidio Quirino created the President Action Committee on Social Amelioration or PACSA to effect socio-economic reforms in the countryside to counteract social unrest. The establishment of the ACFA, Agricultural Credit Cooperative Financing Administration, to promote the effective groupings of farmers into cooperative associations to establish an orderly and systematic marketing machinery for and controlled by the small farmers. To place agriculture on a basis of economic equality with other industries. Establishment of Rural Banks and Labor Management Advisory Board as well as the Presidential Advisory Board. Former President Elpidio Quirino also excelled in foreign relations. Next is former President Ramon del Ferro Magsaysay. Programs, policies, achievements under Magsaysay administration. Republic Act No. 1160 of 1954 abolished the Lasidico and established the National Resettlement and Rehabilitation or NARA to resettle dissidents and landless farmers. It was particularly aimed at tribal returnees providing homes, lots, and farmlands in Palawan and Mindanao. Breaking the backbone of Huk movement. The Huk movement, which began as a socialist communist anti-Japan guerrilla army in 1942, posed a serious military threat to the Philippine Republic after the war. The Huk rebellion was finally put down through a series of reforms and military victories by Magsaysay, who became the 7th president. In May 1954, Luis Tarok surrendered and accepted a 15 years of imprisonment. As part of his overall strategy to defeat the Huks, Magsaysay incorporated civil resettlement project with his military campaign. His rural background told him that as long as the peasant felt no obligation to the central government, the guerrillas could continue to prosper in their midst. Restoration of people's confidence in the government. In his first executive order, he established the Presidential Complaint and Action Commission, which investigated various citizens' complaints and recommended remedial action through different government agencies. The commission served to boost the nation's confidence with its government. It was seen as a fulfillment of President Magsaysay's promise stated in his inaugural address to become a president for the people. The principles of the Magsaysay administration were codified in the Magsaysay Credo and became the theme of leadership and public service. The administration of President Magsaysay was active in the fight against the expansion of communism in the Asian region. He made the Philippines a member of the Southeast Asia Treaty Organization or SEATO, which was established in Manila on September 18, 1954 during the Manila Conference. Members of SEATO were alarmed at the possible victory of North Vietnam over South other countries in the region. The possibility that a communist state can influence or cause other countries to adopt the same system of government is called the domino theory. Reparations Agreement, negotiated with the Japanese government regarding the reparations agreement that was signed in Manila. Japan would pay war reparation for $300 million for 25 years and impose high moral standard for public officials. Former President Carlos P. Garcia. Laws, policies, programs under Garcia's administration. Filipino First Policy. Filipino First refers to a policy first introduced and implemented by the administration of then-President Carlos P. Garcia. Under the policy, Filipino-owned businesses is prioritized over its foreign counterparts and the patronizing of Filipino-made products was promoted. Austerity Program. The austerity program was implemented by Garcia in order to court the rampant graft and corruption within the country. The program centered on wise spending, industry, thrift, trustworthiness, integrity, and honesty. He also urged people to avoid luxury items and to live a simple life, and reminded government officials and employees that corruption destroyed the people's trust in the government. Bolen-Serrano Agreement. The Bolen-Serrano Agreement was the law that shortened the original 99 years list of U.S. bases here in the Philippines for 25 years. The agreement was renewable for periods only up to 5 years. Republic Cultural Awards. The Republic Cultural Heritage Awards began in 1960 as it was instituted by the administration of President Carlos P. Garcia. It put emphasis on reviving the Filipino culture. In doing so, the Republic Cultural Awards was created. To this day, the award is being given to Filipino artists, scientists, historians, and writers. Former President Diosdado Macapagal. President Diosdado Macapagal implemented the control, free enterprise, and an open-door policy to foreign investors. His socio-economic policies included the restoration of economic stability, improvement of condition of the common people by providing employment opportunities. In 1963, the Agrarian Reform Code was enacted which abolished sharecropping tenancy and replaced it with leasehold system. The Agrarian Reform is founded on the right of farmers and regular farm workers who are landless to own directly or collectively the land they till, or in the case of other farm workers, to receive a just share of the fruits thereof. 3844, an act to ordain the Agricultural Land Reforms Code and to institute land reforms in the Philippines, including the abolition of tenancy and the channeling of capital into industry. Provide for the necessary implementing agencies, appropriate funds therefore, and for other purposes. Macapagal changed the Philippine Independence Day from July 4 to June 12. The Philippine government filed claims to Sabah in 1962. Macapagal initiated the establishment of Mapilindo, an organization composed of peoples of Malay stock. In 1963, the chiefs of state of the Philippines, Indonesia, and the Federation of Malaya signed the agreement known as the Manila Accord. The existence of the organization was short-lived with Malaysia over the question of Sabah. The establishment of Mapilindo will remove the barriers that have been built artificially to divide the people of the Malay race. These two developments, however, accomplish more than the rectification of what is unjust or unnatural, and the propagation of the Filipino language in diplomatic credentials, passports, stamps, traffic signs, and landmarks. Former President Emmanuel Edralin Marcos Sr. Under the Marcos administration, the country hosted the Manila Summit in 1966. The conference aimed to resolve the Vietnam War and sought the restoration of peace and promotion of economic stability and development throughout the Asia-Pacific region. Among the laws approved by President Marcos were Republic Act No. 5186 or the Investment Incentives Act, Republic Act No. 4864 or the Police Act of 1966, Republic Act No. 5173 which established the Philippine Coast Guard, Proclamation 1081 Proclamation of Martial Law. 1081, President Marcos enacted a proclamation which enabled him to rule by military power. He initially signed the proclamation on September 17, 1972, but it was postponed to 21 September because of his superstition and numerological beliefs that were related to number 7. Martial law is declared in an emergency in a response to crisis or to control occupied territory. When martial law is declared, civil liberties such as the right to free movement, free speech, protection from unreasonable searches, and habeas corpus laws may be suspended. The reason why President Marcos declared martial law. In September 1972, Marcos declared martial law claiming it was the last defense against the rising disorder caused by increasingly violent students' demonstrations, the alleged threats of communist insurgency by the new Communist Party of the Philippines or CPP and the Muslim separatist movement of the Moro National Liberation Front or MNLF. The purpose of imposing martial law is to restore order and or preserve the current government of a country. Citizens who defy martial law may be subject to trial in a military court rather than the usual civil or criminal courts. Constitutional authoritarianism. Marcos defined constitutional authoritarianism as the government will discipline and punish its own along with the criminal elements. Constitutional authoritarianism respects the limit fixed by the Constitution. Its function is to protect or restore the traditional legal order in crisis situations or in domestic or foreign emergencies. The Agrava Commission. On October 14, 1933, President Marcos issued the Presidential Decree No. 1886 creating an independent board of inquiry called the Agrava Commission or the Agrava Board, 1886 known as the Agrava Fact-Finding Board Commission, to investigate the assassination of opposition Senator Benigno Aquino Jr. Marcos appointed Agrava to be the chairperson of the board. Members are Luciano Salazar, Dante Santos, Ernesto Herrera, Amado Dizon, and legal counsel Andres Narvaza. Foreign policy. Marcos redefined foreign policy as the safeguarding of territorial integrity and national dignity and emphasized increased regional cooperation and collaboration. The 1986 snap election. After being dared by an American journalist, President Marcos declared a snap election during an interview on the American Broadcasting Company Political Affairs program This Week with David Brinkley in November 1985. Then President Marcos announced before an American television audience that he would hold a snap election for the presidency to confirm that he still had the mandate of the people. On February 7, 1986, a snap election was held amid report of fraud, violence, and disfranchisement. Next is former President Corazon C. Aquino. Aquino proclaimed a revolutionary government under a freedom constitution that was promulgated in March 1986. She directed the drafting of a new constitution, Proclamation No. 3. Programs under Aquino's administration. And these are focus areas: education sector, environment sector, peace and security sector, Republic Act No. 11313, Safe Spaces Act Baul Bastos Law, agriculture, fisheries and forestry sector, labor employment sector, migration sector, and GAD budget, gender and development. The Presidential Commission on Good Government (PCGG) was created to recover the ill-gotten wealth of Marcos and his cronies. Aquino restored democratic institutions. Aquino adopted a total war policy and directed the military to implement a comprehensive counter-insurgency program to include rehabilitation of rebel returnees. Aquino issued Proclamation No. 131, which instituted the Comprehensive Agrarian Reform Program or CARP. Executive Order 229 provided mechanism for CARP implementation. In 1987, Aquino approved the Omnibus Investment Code that provided to foreign investors. Aquino decided to pay all existing debts and restored to borrowings to bridge the fiscal deficit. The March 27 Accord rescheduled the 10.3 billion debt. The Aquino administration also emphasized cooperative and friendship with the US and other countries. February 2, 1987, the plebiscite for the ratification of the 1987 Constitution. Former President Fidel V. Ramos. The Ramos administration from June 1992 to June 1998 defined the four core priorities of the Philippine foreign policy, namely the enhancement of national security, promotion of economic diplomacy, protection of overseas Filipino workers and Filipino national abroad, the projection of a good image of the country. The 5-point program on Ramos governance: peace and stability, economic growth and sustainability development, energy and power generation, environmental protection and streamlined bureaucracy, economic reforms, the relegation of key industries, privatization of public entities, and dismantling of monopolies. Next is former President Joseph Estrada. From his inaugural speech, President Estrada outlined his administration policies. He would initiate pro-poor programs, stamp out crime, and do away with corruption. Lastly is former President Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. Programs under Arroyo's administration are poverty alleviation, political stability, peace and order, and food security. Also, under Arias administration, the state of rebellion declared is a government declaration that suspends a number of civil rights for a short period of time. It is a form of martial law that allows the government to suppress protests, detain and arrest people, search private property, read private mail, and listen to phone conversation using wiretaps, all without legal warrants. And that would be all, the end of my discussion. Thank you for watching and listening.